Good afternoon and welcome to Green Island Gardens. Today I'm going to be looking at bulbs. I'm going to share with you the bulbs that I consider to be the most garden worthy, the best in design terms to grow. This morning I started lifting up this little clump of Scilla peruviana, which I think is a fantastic bulb. In design terms, it's almost evergreen. You can see here the new growth from the bulbs, and you might think that's a strange time of year for bulbs to be growing, because most people, when you talk about bulbs, they'll think about spring flowering bulbs such as snowdrops, crocuses, daffodils and tulips, and there the list usually ends. But actually there are bulbs to give you colour through the gardens all through the year. And this particular Scilla has the most beautiful flowers, heads of masses and masses of blue star-shaped flowers in about May. But the foliage is almost evergreen, which is really unusual for bulbs. After they've flowered, they do die back. This is the flower head left from this year, and a few of the stems. We've cleared most of that away, and they go dormant just literally for about 2 months in the summer. And then as soon as we get rain, August, September, up comes the new growth for next year. So I'm just lifting out this clump here. You can see it's got quite congested. There's several bulbs in it. So I'm just lifting it out here. And what I'm going to do is split off one bit, take this bit away, pot it up, move it to another area in the garden. And what I shall do is just pop these ones back in here so that we still have a decent clump. But this is a lovely bulb, and I fully recommend it for a sunny spot. It needs full sun. Other than that, it's virtually maintenance free. So a really, really good plant for your garden. There we are. No one will even know that I've taken some out. So we've now moved slightly round in the gravel entrance garden, and you can see there are lots and lots of bulbs in this area. They are such good plants. They are low maintenance, relatively cheap, easy to grow. This is a lovely one here. It's a typical August, September flowering one. It's called Yuukomis Sparkling Burgundy. You can see it has these lovely spires of pink flowers and a little top here that resembles a pineapple, and hence Yuukomis go by the common name of pineapple lily. But this one I particularly like for its foliage. It has turned green now, but when it first emerges in the spring, it's deep, deep burgundy and shiny, glossy leaves. These lovely wide strap leaves give a gorgeous contrast to this lovely Lophomertus behind it. The flower spikes go on flowering for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then attractive berries follow afterwards. For some reason, this particular variety of Yuukomis have become quite difficult to source. I'm not quite sure why, but there are more and more Yuukomis hybrids becoming available. But instead of just going to your normal garden centre and having a look at the bulbs collections at this time of year, I would suggest you look online at a really, really good bulb retailer, someone like De Jager or Blom's. They have really good catalogues, or they have an extensive list of bulbs. And it is possible to have plant bulbs, to have them flowering virtually every single month. Well, it is every single month throughout the year. So I would encourage you to try and plant more bulbs. In general, I would say plant several of each variety rather than one or two. They're not expensive, and you get a really, really good effect by planting more rather than less. Just round from the Yuukomis, we have another one of my favourites. This lovely clump of bulbs here is just showing a few flowers now that we're into September. These are Watsonias. Watsonias are South African bulbs, and like so many of them, they need lots of sunshine and copious amounts of water during the growing season. This one is called Tresco Pink Dwarf, and its main flowering period is in end of June into July. But as an added bonus, it sends up a few extra late flowering spikes, so we get an extended period of colour with them. This clump here was originally just 3 bulbs a few years ago, and you can see how well they've multiplied up. So they're doing really well in this spot here. Although most of the catalogues and books will say that Watsonias won't be fully hardy in this country, these have survived many winters we've had here, down to -8, -10, -15 even in about 2011. And despite the really wet, cold winter last year, the clumps have done just as well this year. As I say, this one is Tresco Pink Dwarf. There are other varieties that we grow. There's a lovely, slightly taller red one called Vandaspuyi, and round the corner we have Dart's Sea Trout. All of them definitely worth a try. You can grow them in pots, but I think they do better out in the soil. Another one of my absolute favourite bulbs, especially for summer flowers and autumn colour, is this lovely one. If I just move the cotinus out the way there, you can see these pretty white flowers here. This is Anthra murieli. Often the name changes, they keep moving it back and categorising it as a gladiolus, but I still know it as Anthra, and I always will, because I think it's a bit different and a bit more special to gladiolus. You can see these gorgeous white flowers with the purple markings in the throat, but the real beauty is the scent. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it's released especially in the evenings. We've actually got a lot of these planted around the terrace, but this is one that's early flowering, so I can show it to you today. They make really good cut flowers. If you cut them and put them in water, they will scent a room in your house for well over a week. They are best really treated as annuals. They are not fully hardy grown outside, and I have lifted them in the past and tried to overwinter them in the greenhouse. But all I've found is you get tiny little bulblets as offsets that grow next year, and the original bulb just doesn't do anything. It's much easier and simpler. They're not expensive to buy, and I always make a note every year to buy a couple of packs of these and pop them in the ground. As I say, they're just a few pence each and well worth treating as an annual. Another bulb which is not often grown because it often proves quite tricky, it's taken me a while to get the knack of growing them and succeeding in getting them to repeat flower, is Fritillaria persica adiaman. Lovely spires of glaucous blue foliage emerge in the spring, and then topped with lovely tall spires of bell-shaped magenta flowers for a long period of time. We're always asked what they are in the garden, and they're always very popular in the nursery. But as I say, they're quite tricky to get them to reflower every year. And sometimes they will come up the first year you plant them, flower beautifully, and then either not come up the next year, or if they do, they tend to come up what we call blind, so they don't have any flowers anymore. So they're one of the few plants that I do actually feed in the gardens here. And after they start dying down in the spring, we usually give them a couple of handfuls of well-rotted manure just around the base of them to feed those bulbs. And we found that they clump up nicely and they flower from year to year. This is also a really, really dry spot they are living in, along with this lovely Comelinia, which is another plant which wouldn't normally be fully hardy. It's a tuber, and the two of them growing side by side in this really dry spot works really well, because after the Fritillaria die back, the Comelinia come up and flower beautifully throughout the autumn. And if the camera just comes in, you could be able to see this clump of bulbs here which resemble onions, and this is the Fritillaria bulbs, and they do tend over time to just work themselves higher up, and I wonder if that's because they like to be baked in the sun. But really, it's better to lift them out and plant them. What we can do is split up the clump, but it's easy at the moment because there's no roots on them. These are much as you would receive if you sent off for some, or if you bought them in a garden centre at the moment. So the bulbs like this, we can take some of these out and pot them up. And the ones that are left here, what I'm going to do is move them out, dig them a hole a bit deeper for them. Oh, I've got some there. It's one of the hazards of using the fork, unfortunately, but you can see the size that some of these have made. And what we need to do is just dig a hole and plant them separately, but a bit deeper again. So I'm just going to pop that one in underneath the soil. And you can see after the wet summer we've had, how dry this soil is still here. But it suits these Fritillarias really, really well. So if you've got a nice dry sunny spot in the garden, definitely worth giving those a go. One of the highlights of the summer gardens here at Green Island are the tree lilies. Right through July and August we have massive clumps of huge, enormous, tall spires of lilies, often even with up to 30 blooms per stem. I couldn't possibly do a video recommending my 10 favourite or even 12 favourite bulbs without including a lily of some sort. And one of my favourites of all is Lilium anastasia. I'm not sure why it's my favourite. The scent is absolutely beautiful. It's mid-season and it's a particularly good doer. It grows tall, lovely, strong stems, masses of blooms, and it clumps up really, really quickly. So here you can see a little clump in behind me here of 3 bulbs which were planted a couple of years ago here. 3 individual bulbs. And now we have on this one, 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 stems already. So if I wanted, I could dig this up. I would probably leave it for another month or so until the leaves start turning brown and they're no longer feeding the bulbs down below, which is what they do and why we leave them here. We have got a separate video on growing tree lilies, so I won't expand too much on how to do them. But as I say, wouldn't be without them. They grow beautifully in pots as well. The scent is absolutely to die for, and they will scent a huge area of the gardens. You can smell them from 30 or 40 yards in the woodlands before you actually reach them and see what's creating that gorgeous perfume. Just in the bed here on the corner of the tea room, we have a clump of one of my other favourite bulbs, Camassia Leitlinii keralia. It flowers in May. It has lovely tall spires of blue flowers, really vivid blue, and they almost look like giant bluebells. Lovely strap-shaped foliage, a really good bulb. They prefer a slightly moist soil and they will multiply up really quickly. I know there's some in here because A, I know they're here, but B, I can see the stems that have died down from last year. And it now is an ideal time to go in and just have a little dig and see if we can dig a few up and split them and plant them in another area of the garden. So we can see a few roots, and here we are. Here's a clump of bulbs. They look a bit like daffodils, but you can see they've already started to grow their roots for the coming season. So now is an ideal time to lift them up and spread them. We can plant these either enlarging the clump here or take them to another area in the garden and plant them there. They also are really good bulbs for naturalising in grass. We've got masses of them planted in the orchard and they flower in May alongside the purple tulips and make an absolute picture. Really good bulbs, a really good investment, and they're not expensive to buy a couple of them. And as I say, they will clump up really quickly for you. Just in front of me here, we have another clump of bulbs, which looking not their best. They've clearly done their thing and gone past, but I've left those stems in there for a reason, because I wanted to be able to come back and locate where they are so that I can lift them up and split them as we have been doing with a lot of the other bulbs at this time of year. This is Gladiolus communis byzantinus. It's a species gladiolus, so it's not like the traditional gladioli that are grown that are summer flowering and often used in cut flower arrangements and church bouquets and things. This one has spires of really bright magenta flowers in May time, and it looks spectacular here. It comes just after the Camassias alongside the wisteria. It self-seeds itself happily, and it's found native growing in Turkey. So we're just going to dig up a couple of the bulbs here just to show you what they look like. But again, you can buy these from any reputable nurseryman, bulb wholesaler, and plant some yourself. But here we can see, there's one of the bulbs there, and you can see how it's got these little bulblets to the side, several of them. Little red bulblets, so we could split those all off. But if left in situ, over time, these ones will all develop into big bulbs such as this. This is a flowering sized bulb. So we can take that one away and plant it in another location. But again, another bulb definitely worth looking out for. So now we've come into the woodland. There's lots and lots of bulbs that do really well in these woodland conditions, and they often come up, flower and do their thing, set seed and go back underground even before the trees come into leaf in the spring. One of my favourites in this situation is Erythronium. Erythronium californicum white beauty. The common name for it is dog's tooth violet. And I remember that there's a lovely patch of them here, but there's also a lot of snowdrops in this area. So I'm just going to have a careful dig and see if I can find some. And then we'll be able to lift those again, split the clumps and spread them further afield. So let's have a little go. Ah, there we are. Now, lovely clump of bulbs here. And you can see the shape of these bulbs is very, very distinctive. So immediately I know I've got the right bulb. And hence the name dog's tooth violet. You can see from the shape of it, that's where it gets its common name. But lots and lots of them growing very close together. Thank you, Lola. But you can see a lovely clump of them here. We can take several of those out. Still leave plenty in this clump where they are. And they'll actually do better for being split up and spread around. So we'll just leave those ones where they were, cover them up with a bit of leaf litter, and then we can plant all these ones elsewhere. So let's pop a few in here. See, the soil is terribly dry despite all the rain we've had this summer. But that's good for the bulbs because they remain dormant over the summer and they like to sit dry for the summer months. So we'll put 2 or 3 or a little clump of them into each hole. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, just literally dig the hole, pop them in and cover them up again. So you might be thinking this is a bit strange. We're well into a video of my favourite top 10 bulbs, or top 12 or however many, and we haven't mentioned the classics, snowdrops, daffodils and tulips at all. I couldn't omit those totally from my favourites, but obviously at this time of year it's not ideal to be showing you those. In terms of snowdrops, the one I would recommend if you're going to choose one would be one called Galanthus magnet. It's a really strong grower. It has wide, deep green leaves and the flowers beautiful white on really long pedicels. So they hang and just move in the wind as it blows. Really, really pretty bulb. It clumps up really well, really quickly, and it makes a really nice display in a short period of time. So that would be the Galanthus, the snowdrop that I would recommend. In terms of daffodils, there are so many. All I would say is plant masses of them, whichever you choose, but choose 1 or 2 varieties. Spread your season, so maybe choose one that's flowering in February, have another variety for March, and one of my favourites is a very small jonquil hybrid, and it's called Narcissus April Tears. It has dainty little yellow flowers, often after most of the really bright brash daffodils have gone past. It's excellent for growing in pots, but the real beauty of it, and all the jonquil hybrids, is the beautiful scent it has. So it's gorgeous for cutting and bringing inside as well. In terms of tulips, tulips traditionally were grown on bedding plants. They don't tend to overwinter and come from year to year and clump up and multiply the same way that a lot of other bulbs do. They will perhaps diminish over the years. So it's perhaps better to think of those as an annual investment. But again, I would select one variety and plant masses of it. It's much more effective than choosing 5 or 6 different varieties and planting a few of each one. One of my favourites is called National Velvet. It's a really deep claret red. And of all the ones I've grown, it does seem to come back year after year. So, and the other thing I would say about tulips is don't be tempted to plant them too early. They are later into growth, so typically you want to wait until November. If you plant them earlier, which we would do with snowdrops and moving all these other bulbs around at the moment, and the Camassias, the daffodils, etc., the tulips will actually, because they're still dormant, they will sit in the soil, and if we have a wet autumn, they will either rot or be eaten by mice and squirrels before they've had a chance to grow. So leave them until at least November, And it won't hurt if you don't plant them until December. You'll still get a really good display next year. So I hope you've enjoyed our video on bulbs. All the ones that I've mentioned are available in our nursery, or as I say, get them from an online wholesaler. But please remember to like and subscribe our video. Thank you for watching once again.